This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to Dialogue. On this very day, 25 years ago, Hong Kong, one of the most prosperous cities in the world, officially returned to China after 1.5 centuries of colonial rule. This morning, Chinese President Xi Jinping was in Hong Kong to attend the 25th anniversary of Hong Kong's return to the motherland, and also the inauguration of the sixth-term government of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, where he delivered a keynote speech. What are some of the highlights of the president's speech, and how should we review the past 2.5 decades of the one country, two system practice? And what does the future hold for the famous South China port city? Today, I'm glad to be joined by Witman Hung, Hong Kong Deputy to the 13th National People's Congress, Victor Gao Zhikai, Chair Professor at Soochow University, and Einar Tangen, Independent Current Affairs Commentator. That's our topic. I'm Xu Qinduo. Okay, welcome to the discussion, gentlemen. Whitman, I will start with you. You were at the ceremony and you were at the site. So what's your impression?
Well, first of all, it's very encouraging. Okay? President Xi's speech was, very upfront. It's clear. It used languages that can be understood by most ordinary people, where he emphasized the importance of the one country, two systems, the importance of Hong Kong, the importance of the overall jurisdiction of the central government, while also painting the path of how Hong Kong should progress in the future. Basically, the next term of the government, what should be the focus. He actually spelled it out very clearly. I think that's a very good thing. Because, Hong Kong, just after the pandemic and the riots and a lot of other things in the past, we really need a new direction. Instead of people trying to second guess what the central government is thinking or what our leaders are thinking, I think it's very good that President Xi actually spelled it out very clearly. The reasons behind, the directions and objectives, and what his expectations are for the new administration.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know, Anna, you have followed this ceremony, the speech closely. What's your takeaway?
Well, optically, I think the most important thing is that this is the meeting that Xi Jinping went to. This was the ceremony. And it really emphasizes that there is one country, two systems, meaning these two systems are under one country. If you look at Article 2 of the basic laws, it says absolutely crystal clear that the NPC is in charge. The NPC is the National People's Congress. That is the highest organ of government in China. So I think this is really optically very, very important. The fact that he was at the swearing-in ceremony, officiated over it, makes it very clear that the power emanates from Beijing, that this was an occupied territory that was basically run by the British for 150 years. It was a humiliation to China. They seized it because they wanted to sell drugs to things. And now today, they have the audacity to say, it was such a wonderful time when we were there. We didn't institute democracy and things like this. So there's that element, the contrast between what is being said internationally, the fact that he's there, and then the second part is this rebirth. He's used the idea of fire. Obviously, these protests were a fire. They really tore Hong Kong down. They destroyed property. They attacked and killed, attacked policemen. There was deaths that occurred because of this, and people were not able to walk in the streets safely and enjoy their livelihood. So from that point, Hong Kong has had a rebirth. Since the security law has been passed, there have been no mass demonstrations. There have been no mass property vandalism and things like this. So those are the important parts to me. Yes, I agree that he's laid out a very firm plan for the future, but I think that will get lost in the details. But those two elements, I think, are really important.
Well, Victor, let's talk a little bit about history. One country, two system obviously is critical in terms of Hong Kong and the relationship with the motherland. Tell us where it is from and how it works.
Well, first of all, let's congratulate the 25th anniversary for Hong Kong's return to China. 25 years ago, today and yesterday, on June the 30th and July the 1st, 1997, I was in Hong Kong. I was a witness and I participated in some of the ceremonies marking the transfer of Hong Kong back to China. So I remember things very clearly. And watching the ceremonies today and listening very carefully to what President Xi Jinping has to say, it really is very profound and very meaningful in looking back, in terms of looking forward and also sizing up the current situation. Now, when China and Britain negotiated about the return of Hong Kong in the early 1980s, I was in the foreign ministry in China at that time, and I was directly or indirectly also involved in this China-British negotiations to a certain extent. There was an impasse eventually. The British government, headed by Prime Minister Thatcher, basically insisted that they would only return the new territory to China in 1997. They would keep the Hong Kong Island as well as the Kowloon Peninsula to themselves in perpetuity. But Deng Xiaoping said no. In 1997, all these three pieces of lands in Hong Kong need to be returned. And Margaret Thatcher basically asked her why, And Deng Xiaoping said, sovereignty should not be discussed or negotiated. By 1997, Hong Kong need to be returned to China in its entirety. And then he asked Margaret Thatcher, why do you think part of Hong Kong would not be returned? And Margaret Thatcher said, well, it's because Hong Kong practiced capitalism and China practiced socialism. I think Deng Xiaoping's genius basically flared up. He basically said, your problem solved. Hong Kong will continue to practice capitalism for 50 years. So one country, two system. I think this was truly the highest level of human wisdom because it eventually paved the way for the smooth return of Hong Kong to China without firing a shot, without causing any international incident, for example. So I think one country, two system was truly human wisdom and also was very instrumental in Hong Kong's smooth return. And ever since 1997, it has been the cornerstone of everything that Hong Kong is built upon. Now, any attempt by anyone inside Hong Kong or outside Hong Kong which wants to undermine the one country, two system will end in miserable failure. So I think today, when President Xi Jinping was presiding over this major ceremony, when the new administration is sworn in, for example, when the whole air in Hong Kong is again filled with optimism and upwardness, for example, we are keenly aware of the importance of the one country, two system. It will guide Hong Kong forward in the coming 25 years. It will enable Hong Kong to excel and prosper once again in the world.
Well, Witman, one country, two systems. So obviously, Hong Kong practices different system, capitalism from the mainland over there. How do you describe its performance over the past 25 years?
Well, obviously, it's very good. And just like what President Xi just said in his speech, he said, I wish to highlight once more that the policy of one country, two system has been tested time and again. Meets the fundamental interests of the country and the Chinese nation and those of Hong Kong and Macau. And we have seen that. I think the one country and the two systems is by itself has been challenged by various people. But right now, in its current form, with the new national security law as well as the emphasis of the overall jurisdiction of the central government, I think that's put one country, two system back in the correct perspective. The capitalist system in Hong Kong, obviously, one thing, personally, I may have an issue with that. It's still a bit like what it was in 1984 when the Joint Declaration was signed. So I think we need to move on that one. That's my academic thesis. We need to improve our capitalist system. But at the same time, the one country, two system by itself has worked, has proven. So, and it has also given Hong Kong a very high degree of autonomy, It has maintained Hong Kong as an international city, as well as its common law system and everything else, and as a financial hub. So, on that essence, it's very good.
Well, Anna, to clarify a little bit about the situation in Hong Kong, I think the president also mentioned in his speech about democracy. Basically said that after its return to the motherland, Hong Kong compatriots became masters of their own affairs. Hong Kong people administered Hong Kong with a high degree of autonomy, and that was the beginning of true democracy in Hong Kong. What was it like before the return in 1997?
Well, I mean, if you go back to the original seizure of it, they had basically a governor who was appointed by the Crown. They could do anything they wanted. They had an advisory committee, this legislative council, but they could ignore it. They had the command of the troops. Over many years, they successfully, brutally put down protest by workers who were complaining about the conditions and the forced labor that they were involved in. And the Crown did nothing about it. Even in the 60s, they were brutally repressing, mass arrests, 1,800 people. No one had the vote. And I mean, to give you an example, there was a modest proposal by the governor to the Crown saying, look, we should have some sort of representation. Listen, there's 140 plus people that I think could be not put in as representatives, but they could elect a couple of people who would be on the advisory council. So the answer came back that no, the Chinese people have no ability to discern right or wrong and all this type of thing. It was basically extremely racist. Now, the irony here is that half of that 140 were British. So they didn't even trust their own people to elect people who were going to be advisory to an all-powerful governor. And this continued up until Chris Patten. Now, Chris Patten has been very vocal in saying, he's saddened by what happened and things like that. He introduced democracy when it was absolutely crystal clear that Hong Kong was going back to China, to its homeland. And when he did so, it looks more like a poison pill, trying to tamper with or change the regime in China by introducing, quote, this idea. There's always, with WHO, the United States thought that, once China is involved in the international finance community and goods and markets, there's no turning back, democracy will break out. The British had it on the other way. Once we introduce democracy into Hong Kong, the Chinese government will fail because they will not be able to measure up. Well, the truth is, China has been extremely successful for the last 40 years, and it continued after the return of Hong Kong. Hong Kong, please keep it in context. Hong Kong is not a major economic power in itself. It's a financial power. If you look at the GDP per person, it's sky high. But if you look at the actual wages, very low. Why? Because it's a door in and out of China. So without China, Hong Kong, unfortunately, would be a rock in the sea, unable to even have enough water or food to feed its people.
Mm-hmm. Let's have a short break. We'll be back to continue the discussion right after this.
Facing the unknown is always difficult. In a world in turmoil, it's easy to lose orientation. But when the storms come, we have to see the possibilities, reinvent, find new opportunities, discover a path forward. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back. Witman, obviously, by sticking to the rule of law, one country, two systems over there, and also there's another element about the patriots running the country. As the president said in the speech, it is a universal rule in the world that the political power must be in the hands of the patriots. No country or region in the world will allow unpatriotic or even treacherous or treasonous forces and figures to seize power. I mean, it is obvious why it's necessary to point out the obvious.
I think the issue is, even though it's obvious, and this is actually one of the fundamentals of the one country, two system when Deng Xiaoping put it, into a suggestion. He actually said at that time that one country, two system and Hong Kong people administrating Hong Kong. The basic assumption is most of the people in Hong Kong are patriots. And the Hong Kong people administrating Hong Kong are done by the patriotic Hong Kong people. Now, this was actually in the original assumption, I think in the 80s, when he said that. But somehow, after the reunification, there was not enough emphasis in this, okay, in Hong Kong, okay, and there was no hard rules about defining who is a patriot, who's not, and people kind of, because just like I forgot what the other speaker said, when in 1997, 25 years ago, not a single bullet was shot, not a single officer was fired. Okay, we put in a new chief executive and become Mr. Tong. He became the new head of the city, but everything else remained the same, and there was no, guarantee that the old British system, as well as the people in those systems, were indeed, supporting patriots. So, and over the years, this has caused some problems. We have seen people especially in the old legislative council, just before, during the riots and before, a few years before, I think since 2012 to 14, we have already seen that people in our legislature, which is part of, the government, they were actually colluding with foreign powers. They are asking foreign powers to sanction Hong Kong. They are doing things that demonstrated that they, in fact, not patriots. And when you're having these people in the government, in whichever part of the government, it actually hurts the system, hurts the confidence, and overall, it violates the fundamental principle of why the central and Mr. Deng and the central government allow Hong Kong to have a high degree of autonomy, and also Hong Kong people administrating Hong Kong.
Victor, you want to jump in?
Yes, allow me to add one point. I think what President Xi Jinping said is profound truth, so obvious to everyone that most of us have taken it for granted. We no longer talk about it. But in the case of Hong Kong, because of its complexities and its 150 years plus rule by the British, how to make that switch from being loyal to the British rulers in Hong Kong before 1997 to being loyal to China as its sovereign, as well as the Hong Kong SAR government. That's a process to be completed, is that right? Now, allow me to use the example of the United States. When officers take office, they need to take an oath by putting their hands on the Bible to declare that they are ready and willing and committed to defend the United States against enemies, both domestic and foreign. So this is the tradition for the United States. Can you imagine some officer in the United States to take an oath saying, I will not defend the interest of the United States. I will not defend against enemies, domestic and foreign. No, it's not going to work in the United States. It's the same case in Hong Kong. You need to be loyal to the sovereign, that is China. You need to be loyal to the Hong Kong SAR government by protecting and preserving, implementing the one country, two system by implementing the basic law. So this is a very profound truth being explicitated and clarified again, especially during President Xi Jinping's speech. I hope from today on, everyone in Hong Kong will know for sure what does this one country, two system mean. There is no other country in Hong Kong but China, and the two systems will be complementing each other and will be preserved for Hong Kong as well as for China itself up to 2047. And I hope if the situation in Hong Kong remains robust and profitable for the interest of people of Hong Kong, it may be further extended beyond 2047. That's my biggest hope today.
Mm-hmm. Well, and looking forward to the next 5 years with the new government led by John Lee, what are the priorities for the Hong Kong government, for its prosperity, stability, continuous development as a financial center of the globe?
Okay. So to understand, I want to just put some background in. I mean, Hong Kong was administered as an apartheid possession by the British Chinese people were equated with dogs, and literally, no dogs are Chinese in the parks and things like that. Basically, you had an overclass, mostly British expats, and a few very wealthy Hong Kong families, and beneath them, you had the rest of the people who just serviced them. Now, going forward to today, you have a situation where that system has to be dismantled. You cannot have 5 million Hong Kong people serving 2 million rich and foreign groups out there. Yes, it does need to be a financial center, but it doesn't have to be one that oppresses its people. So going forward, the issue is, how do you implement a forest system? They're creating a new city near Shenzhen, and this city will hopefully alleviate the property price issues, because right now people live in dingy, squalid little closets, 3 generations, unable, I mean, literally, the bathroom and the kitchen are in the same place, and everyone is sitting, if everyone sits down, somebody has to stand up to eat. So in that kind of situation, they have no hope, no future. And that is exactly what I think Xi Jinping was trying to say. He says there is a roadmap, just like there was in mainland China, to create the kind of prosperity and opportunities that we have here. I don't think he didn't apologize for allowing this kind of situation to do. I mean, allowing, as was said, the education system to keep espousing something that was untrue. But it's quite clear that the mainland, Beijing, has taken things in hand, and they know that the priority is the people, not these ideas that are being floated in through foreign entities and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, Witman, John Lee, the new chief executive, also talked about people-based approach or philosophy of governing of the next 5 years. What does it mean?
Yeah, well, John's a friend, so I've known him for a long time. This particular, I don't like the official translation of people-based. I think it's more like people-centric. Okay, I think that's a better translation, because John said it in Chinese. I think it's very simple. We just like what it echoes actually what President Xi later said. That the better livelihood of people is what we're working on. What we're working for. Okay, so that I think, of course, in John's speech, he actually mentioned that development is the key. Okay, you cannot just solve this problem by redistributing. Okay, we need to develop. And in develop, there are 2 things. On one side, it's obviously in the property area where you need to solve the problem of land and housing. We need to develop more land. I think, and I just mentioned this northern metropolis, of which I had a little bit of involvement as well. The new idea is not only to solve housing problem, but also to solve employment together. So the newly built estates in the north, close to the Shenzhen border, it will not be just housing. They will include, business, CBDs, as well as technology firms and science parks. So this way, people can live and work there. Another thing that John also mentioned during his speech is about the enhancement of competitiveness and develop the economy. I think that is also important. Yes, Hong Kong was strong in the past, was a very good financial center, and so on and so on. But we need to cope with the world's change, okay? Especially with the new Greater Bay Area development. We're going to build Hong Kong as well as the whole Greater Bay into an international innovation and technology center. Okay, and Hong Kong will play a major role there. Just like what President Xi visited the science park yesterday. He visited, some of my friends there, and there is a lot of things happening, and the new administration will help to foster, to support more, innovation and technology development together with the other cities in the Greater Bay Area, such as Shenzhen and Guangzhou, so that we can actually have, a more diverse economy, not just relying on, for example, finance. Okay, but we also have a more diverse, so that young people have more chances of moving up. They have more chances of starting their own entrepreneurship. And it will be this together with the development strategy of property and land and housing that will try to solve the problems in Hong Kong. But having said that, I would say, try to solve all these problems in 5 years is unrealistic. Okay, to develop the northern metropolis, Carrie Lam said it would take about 20 years. Okay, let's say she is too, pessimistic, but I would say you still need at least 10 years to 12 years. Okay, so we need to do all the things together. We also need to leverage the Greater Bay Area, which is what John is proposing to do as well, so that our young people, not only can they work in Hong Kong, but they can also work in the other cities in the Bay Area, leveraging the development of the other part of the country so that we can, prosper together.
Mm-hmm. Well, 1 minute left, Victor. How do you think Hong Kong need to position itself in terms of being part of the national development?
Well, I think several things. One is Hong Kong is very much to be integrated as a major part of the Greater Bay Area. And then the Greater Bay Area will become a major engine of growth for whole China. And then Hong Kong as part of the Greater Bay Area, and the Greater Bay Area in itself will become a high point, a plateau of global high-tech development involving all senses of the word, including finance, for example. This gives hope to Hong Kong. Hong Kong is not standing alone on the huge Chinese coastline. Hong Kong is very much part of China, and that's the reality on the ground. But then people in Hong Kong should also take great pride that they are part of a constantly rising and becoming more and more dynamic China. This is the hope for China, for Hong Kong.
Well, on that note, we concluded today's show. Many thanks to our guests. You can also find us on the CGTN app on YouTube. I'm Xu Qinduo. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.